The first thing we're going to talk about today is design, bid, build. That's the default option under California law. That's the most common. Just I got it.
Got it. Mhm.
There you go. Thank you. Design, bid, build, that's the most common. That's the default. That's the one everyone's familiar with. We're also going to get into lease-leaseback, which is an alternate delivery method for construction projects that are over the bid limit. And also, lastly, design build, which is a second alternate delivery method for construction projects that are over the bid limit. And as Candace pointed out, these aren't always the right approach for every project. Typically, you're going to want larger projects. So let's think of large projects as we go through this. Initially, we'll talk about design, bid, build. This is the method that the district, I think, uses most commonly, and if not on every construction project. This is a really quick visual of how the relationships work under design, bid, build. Design means you have an architect. They're going to have a direct contractual relationship with the district. The architect is going to design the project. Once that design is complete, you have final approved drawings, then there's going to be a bid. Okay, and then that bid is how we're going to select a general contractor. So that's the design, bid, build. Once you select a general contractor, they're going to build that project for you. A couple of items on design, bid, build. Like I mentioned, this is the most common and most widely accepted delivery method. This is the default methodology for those projects that are over the bid limit. This helps the district have control over the design because you're working with the architect to come up with your design and get that design approved. So once completed, that design package is then submitted to DSA, and once that DSA approval is achieved, that's when you can bid out your project. Okay, and when you bid it out, you're going to go with the lowest cost bid. The lowest responsible bid is the nomenclature that we use. So whoever is the contractor submitting the lowest responsible bid to that bid packet, that is the contractor that would be awarded the contract if the district does decide to move forward and award the contract. There's always an option to reject all bids if for whatever reason the district doesn't like the bids or doesn't like the contractor or whatever the case may be. You always have that right and ability to reject all bids. You don't have to award a contract. Some of the pros of design, bid, build is competitive. It's a competitive bidding process. No one sees that final approved design until the bid is issued. And so once that bid is issued, then that's the first time contractors see it. They put together their best bid and they submit those sealed bids to the district. So it's a very competitive process. It's an easy to manage process. I say that, I know the district probably doesn't feel that way sometimes when there's bid protests or things like that, but let's say it's easy to manage and it's universally understood since it is the default methodology under California law. And you have that defined project prior to bid. So that defined project is your bid plans, your bid specifications. So those are the pros. The cons are, that sometimes contractors do take advantage of the competitive process. What I mean by that is that, as I mentioned, no one sees that final design until that bid is issued. However, once that bid is issued, everyone opens up the design. Experienced contractors may look at that and say, well, you know what? They want outlets in this room. There's no outlets in this room. Okay, well, I'm going to take that into account in my bid. I'm going to lowball it, knowing that there's going to be change orders down the line. Okay, so that's what I mean by taking advantage of it. They can kind of read plans, see where there are going to be issues, see where there are going to be problems, know that they can probably make it up on the back end with change orders and that type of thing, and they kind of game the system in that way. That design that I mentioned, it suffers because there is no early contractor involvement. Okay, it's going to be the architect, district staff. If you have a construction manager, they may have some input in that early stage, but the contractors don't see it. That leads to change orders being common. As I mentioned, if there's issues with the design, they're going to submit their bids based on that design, but they're going to know that there are going to be issues with it in the future. They're not going to bring that up, obviously, in the bid. That's going to be brought up later on, and that's why you see change orders sometimes on your projects. Obviously, there are sometimes district-driven change orders. So if you want, for example, a different material you can certainly do that, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about contractor-driven change orders as being the con in this regard, okay? And then oftentimes there are delay claims or there's other disputes that arise during the construction process. These are a lot more common in the design bid build process because it's a little bit more adversarial. If the contractor is really kind of an external party to this, they're not really part of the district team per se, other than having that contractual relationship. And so sometimes you see delay claims and that type of thing that arise because of disputes during the construction process. So that's design bid build. We're going to cover lease-leaseback. Okay, so design bid build, that's in the statute. Another option, an alternative delivery method is lease-leaseback. So under lease-leaseback, the district leases the property to the contractor, and the contractor is going to lease back that construction site to the district with the facility improvements on it. And there's kind of a general conditions that are attached to that and a payment system that's attached to that. And you can look at this, this quick little diagram up at the top on the slide, and that's the basic arrangement. You have the district as the main client. The architect is going to have a contractual relationship with the district for the design of the project. There's going to be a lease-leaseback builder that's going to be involved once we go through an RFP process, and then that lease-leaseback builder is going to have a contractual relationship with their subcontractors. So let's talk about lease-leaseback a little bit. This is an authorized process in the education code. We're going to use, if we do move forward with the lease-leaseback delivery method, we would use a request for proposals process for the selection of the contractor. Request for proposals process is different from a bid. Request for proposals process gives us much more leeway to select a contractor. In that RFP, we're going to set forth essential criteria, which we identify as the factors that we're going to consider when selecting a contractor. Price can be one of those criteria, but it's not going to be the controlling factor. So bid, when we're doing a design bid build, we have to go with the lowest cost bidder. RFP, when we go with the lease-leaseback, we can go with the contractor that best meets our criteria. It's going to be, safety record, litigation record, maybe location, experience with other community college projects of the same nature that you have. Whatever you want is going to be in there, including price. We score that RFP, and then we're going to come up with who the best fit is for the district. So that's a much more tailored approach to delivering your projects, and that you're going to have much more say in who the ultimate contractor is going to be. Did you have a question?
So do you think the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, are they allowed to provide input as to whether or not we're going to use the design bid build or the lease-leaseback, since they are charged with looking at efficiencies?
No, they shouldn't.
That's not their role.
Yeah,
Because they only look at the expenses after the college expenses it. And their only job is to make sure that what we've expensed matches the bond language.
Oh, so it's just accuracy.
Correct.
Accuracy and accountability.
after the fact. Yeah,
And
after the fact.
accountability. I mean, they should have the ability to tour the facilities where we've used bond funding. They should have the ability to review those pieces, but they are a body to make sure that what we said in the bond language is being described or used in our purchases.
They're quite narrow.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And that's oftentimes a point of contention, especially when the CBOC is first set up, is they need to understand their roles, and that's not their role.
Yeah, we'll have a kickoff. We'll have a training once we see the CBOC, which I know is our next agenda item. We'll have a kickoff training session for them, so that we don't get in, further down the road and there are questions about what their role is.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So another positive feature of lease-leaseback is you can have early contractor involvement in the design process. There's what's called a pre-construction services scope of the lease-leaseback arrangement. So we would go, we would start our design, we would issue an RFP, bring on a contractor before the design is finalized. We can bring on that contractor for a pre-construction services scope, whereby they can come on and be part of the district team at the table with the architect, the construction manager, if you have one, district staff, and look at the design at that point and say, look at the budget, look at the timeline, and make sure that we're working toward that goal.
And of course, you can put that in the RFP, so they don't charge it as an extra charge, because that could be
Right,
hundreds of thousands of dollars for them to
right,
ask their subs how much
right,
these are.
right.
So
right.
they can help us with our budgeting.
Exactly right. Yeah. So that's one of the key features is they come on board early, they know your budget, they know your timeline. And they're ultimately going to be tasked with providing a guaranteed maximum price for the delivery of that project. And so it's to their advantage to make sure that everyone's realistic. They could look at the plans and say, well, you have a $10 million budget, but these plans are going to be a $20 million project. So let's.
Yeah. I was gonna say, are they also, as part of that service, a lot of GCs will go and do estimates for you. So when they look at some blueprints, they can say, you want this swimming pool, we better go and research it and bring it back, and then you just kind of
Right.
tweak it along the
Exactly,
way.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And so that's a feature for lease-leaseback that is not available for design bid build. Obviously, because contractors cannot be involved in a design bid build project until there is final approval from DSA. But that's kind of too late for us. We need it earlier before we go to DSA. We need that contractor involvement for estimation to make sure the architect's budget is accurate, make sure our expectations are accurate, make sure the trustees are all on the same page. So you don't want any surprises. Once you open bids and you're like, well, this is twice as much as what we budgeted. Why is that?
With the GCs also, many of them work with the architects as they're doing the design. Not you design it and then you bring them in. They are actually involved in the design so they can do the budgeting along with the architect.
That can be part of their pre-construction scope.
Right, okay.
Right. And we'll talk about that also in the next option. But anyway, so those are really, I think great positives in addition to the guaranteed maximum price. That guaranteed maximum price will be developed through that, once pre-construction is complete, DSA plans are received. Those plans are then given to the contractor. They then issue those plans to their subcontractors to get their bids from their subs, add those up, add on their profit margin. They're going to present that GMP to the board, to the district staff first, before to the board, but to the district staff to say, okay, well, this is what we had in mind, great, or this is not what we had in mind, we need to work on that. And then that GMP goes to the board for final approval before there's even a construction contract. And so you can see there's a transparent process, multi-step to get to that pricing, to get to that schedule, which will lead to a better delivery, I think, ultimately for a project for the district.
But is that only one general contractor?
Yes. Yeah. So this is per project. This is going to be for, if you have whatever your next project is, if you want it, use lease-leaseback for that, you would use lease-leaseback for that project. And you have one contractor, one general, and then there's obviously direct relationship to them. One of the cons is, anecdotally, I think people think this is the more expensive alternative from a hard bid, because you don't have the blind kind of bidding. You have more of a cooperative approach. That's anecdotal. I haven't really seen any peer-reviewed studies or any kind of economic analysis of whether that's in fact true. Also, I think initially that might be true if it is at all, but ultimately at the end of the day, you're not going to have change orders, you're not going to have delays, you're not going to have claims. So I think it ends up being probably a wash, if not a cheaper process. And from my experience with the clients that use it, I think it's a much more cooperative and teamwork approach to projects rather than there's really no claims and no disputes at the end of it.
So why won't there be any change orders?
Because those are all ironed out in the pre-construction services scope. Obviously, the district can
District initiate.
initiate change orders. If you say, you know what, your GMP is 9 million, we budgeted 10 million, maybe we will go for the nicer windows or the nicer doors or whatever it may be. At that point, then you could have, change orders, but that's going to come from the district for the most part and not from any contractor issue. Okay, so that's lease-leaseback. A second alternative is design build. And so this is an alternative whereby the district has an initial program architect that's going to help you develop initial specifications, but ultimately you're going to issue an RFP to an entity that's going to be both a designer and a builder. Okay, so you have an architect and a contractor as one entity, and that's who your contract's going to be with. And then they contract, obviously, their trade contractors or their subs. Similar to lease-leaseback, this does remove the incentives for claims because you have, in this instance, one party who's both the architect and the contractor, and so they're going to be sure that their plans are up to par. One thing with design build is it does have to be a project that's over $2.5 million. So there is that statutory limit. With lease-leaseback, you can use it for any size of project. I think going back to Candace's original point, you don't necessarily want to use lease-leaseback for really, really small projects because there's a lot of, as you can see, hoops to jump through with the RFPs and all that. So you probably want it to be a certain size, but for design build, it definitely has to be over $2.5 million. So the district, via the design build, you're going to have one contract with your designer builder. And typically, that can be one company. Sometimes it's two companies and they form a joint venture to deliver that under this delivery method. Some of the pros is you have one point of contact for the design and the construction. And that contractor is going to bring practicality to the design because they're going to be responsible for both sides of it. And so you're not going to, have a contractor that's going to come in and look at, yeah, we want to build Taj Mahal. No, we want to, we want to be practical. We want it to be efficient because we have to deliver this project on a GMP basis. Some of the cons is unless that scope is really well defined, that initial scope that goes into the RFP, the district can run into quality issues. Okay, so part of that initial scope is we typically work with a bridging architect, for lack of a better term. That bridging architect will put together those initial kind of preliminary plans and layouts that we use in our RFP. They're going to put some initial specifications in there so that we want to be very clear and direct as to what the district is looking for in this ultimate project. And so if that is not done well, then you can run into issues as to quality. And I think one of the other cons that I've seen is the architect doesn't have a direct contractual relationship with the district. The architect, like I said, is going to be the same entity as the contractor. And so sometimes that check and balance is needed. In this instance, it's not going to be there. And so, that's just a con. But overall, I've seen it delivered successfully. I think this is probably a little bit more cumbersome than the lease-leaseback process. It's definitely, I think, less popular than the lease-leaseback process and design bid build. But it is an efficient process once you get all the pieces in place for its delivery.
Could you put in the RFP for the design build? It concerns me a little bit that the architect and the contractor are working together.
Yes.
When I would, sometimes it's better for the architect to be overseeing the contractor, not that the architect and contractor are all in one.
Right.
But if you put in the RFP that the architect will consider the wishes of the owner, as you go through construction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is part of the arrangement overall, is that entity does have to obviously, consider the wishes of the district. I think it's important though, to have a really good initial bridging architect and initial specifications and initial preliminary plans so that becomes a smoother process down the line. But this is also, I think, one of the pros that I didn't cover is it can be a very timely delivery method. It kind of streamlines the overall construction project schedule, which I know Richard had mentioned earlier that some of the design bid build does take, from inception to completion, quite a few years. This will kind of streamline that because you have that relationship between the two parties, and also you have that early involvement from the contractor in the design as well. Similar to lease-leaseback, so that they can, as you mentioned, take the wishes of the district into account before we even start construction, before we have final DSA approved plans.
If I can add something, we're also looking at shortlisting of architectural services, and the idea would be is that there is a progressive design build, and so what it would be is we have a pool of architects And then we would shortlist the general contractors and they would be able to select within our pre-qualified pool of architects to create the teams. So we get a little bit more control than if we had just put this out as an RFP for services and construction. So that's kind of where we're kind of tending to go, is this more of a progressive design build approach where the district is actually vetting architects. And so there is a little bit of a tie of those architectural firms to the district, and that they've been pre-vetted by the district.
Are there any statistics on K-12s and community colleges? How many of them, dollars, percentages, use each of these three methods in construction?
I haven't seen any, not to say that there aren't. I could, obviously, look quickly and see if there are and provide that to district staff.
Anecdotally, what do you feel like it is? Just based on you do a lot with a lot.
Yeah, well, I think most districts use design bid build as the most common, just because there are a lot of smaller projects that fall, maybe if they don't have Cupca and it's $30,000, you have to bid that out, but that's definitely going to be too small for design build or lease-leaseback. I think for really big projects, the type that you're going to have on some of your new buildings, it's probably, I would say, 40% design bid build and probably 40% lease-leaseback and maybe 20% design build. Some districts, they really like design build and they just go with it. Other districts really like lease-leaseback and they go with it. Sometimes there's a combination. I think that's how I would kind of break it down based on my experience with my clients. For really big projects, it probably breaks down in that.
Yeah, LAUSD, we were the traditional method. And then when we had passed the $20 billion bond, we ended up starting to go with lease-leaseback was a primary on the new schools. And then we started towards the last phase, we started looking at the paired up design build. So they used all three delivery methods.
And did they have any factors that they utilize when making that decision? Did they use like a committee or was it one?
Well, it's a little bit different. We don't have shared at the K-12. They didn't have shared governance, so it's a little bit different. The driving force was basically the delivery method. Like we said, we can streamline a little bit of time. LAUSD was in a rock and a hard place in that they hadn't built schools for so long and they had an overpopulation and trying to get back on traditional track. They had these multiple tracks. So they were in a time crunch and they were trying to get a bunch of, we did 112 schools, brand new facilities within a short period of time. And so that was kind of some of the impetus for going with these alternate delivery methods. Also, they were listening to the contracting community. The contracting community was very vocal and was collaborative with the district and was saying, hey, the way you're putting out, we saw a lot of change orders on design bid build. We saw a lot of problems with plans and, the contractors were coming back and giving us feedback as to far as delivery methods of what was happening in the industry, in private industry, and what was getting more successful outcomes. So those were kind of the driving forces. Mm-hmm. The only thing I can say from experience is, as Sam had pointed out, if we don't have good criteria documents and we go into design build, LA Unified is very prescriptive, and we had spec books that were like this big for all the divisions. A design build contractor will kind of try to come in and give you a specification like this. They try to streamline everything down, and you don't get your prescribed building components. And here, where we're a smaller district, it may not be as critical, but where there's over 1,000 schools, if you get the wrong toilet seat or the toilet seat covers, and now I'm stocking for 999 schools, one toilet seat cover type, and then for one school, I have to stock a different one, it becomes cumbersome.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm told that we need to be expeditious with our.
Yes, we do.
So let me ask you a question. How timely is a decision needed by the board on these alternate methods? In other words, is there something coming up immediately that you want to use one of these alternative methods? Because I want to give this the attention it deserves, both here
And at the board.
and at the board meeting. But
I agree with that.
Yeah. So certainly, we would normally have done a study session, maybe done this over a series of meetings, but there are two critical projects
okay,
that I'm looking at that I would like to try these on. One is the new power distribution center on the east side of campus that will provide the power for the new Serafian building. Our gear is old, and in fact, it's the original gear from the 70s. And that's still powering the east feed of the campus in addition to Serafian. So that project is.
and that's a approximate cost, just very rough.
It's going to be between $2.5 and $3.5 million. That's what we spec'd in 2020.
Yeah.
Or again, escalation, but we should be in that ball. We'll be under 5 million.
Okay.
The second critical project, because it's also within this area of influence that we're working on with Serafian.
Oh, I'm sorry. And this is a time sensitive project to upgrade the power distribution.
Yes,
To tie in with Serafian.
correct.
Gotcha. Okay. And then what's the other one?
The second one is the Galloway Cafe.
Yeah.
So the Galloway Cafe, again, is within the footprint of Serafian, so to speak. It would tie into this power distribution center. And it's the right time to kind of get this project out and going while we're in that area and impacting. And plus, we wanted to get food services on the east side of campus.
Yeah. Got it. And how much is the approximate cost for the Galloway Cafe?
Between 5 and 8 million.
And I see that these two resolutions is really to authorize the board to give the superintendent a designee the authority to choose which one. I mean, the design bid build is traditional, and so you want authorization that you can use these two alternate depending on the project at issue, so that you have some flexibility in deciding what to do.
Correct.
That's
So,
correct.
so when we look at a project with the architect and the team and the project management team, as Sam pointed out, I'm a carpenter by trade and have a tool belt, and these are all different tools for me to accomplish a job.
Sure.
So we, like we said, we wouldn't go straight lease back. We would look at the project and see what makes the most sense. Then we would recommend, with those resolutions in play, staff would work that out, and then we would come to the board with the resolution for the specific project.
I don't have strong feelings about this. I think that flexibility and execution is important. I would like to see some parameters, actually more like factors that one would utilize or consider or weigh in making that decision, so that district officials, along with the attorneys, have some guidance as to gearing them into the right decision making, so that I, as a board member, I feel reassured that there's a test out, the formula basically, and that we've checked off, or we considered. You don't have to have a check-off list. You've considered these 10x number of factors, and when you consider them, it way more towards lease-leaseback. We considered these other factors for this project. It leans more towards design build. And then I just feel more comfortable that way. And I think the public would when they start scrutinizing what we're doing, because these are more expensive delivery methods. But we can say, we have a process in place. And those are my thoughts.
I think that makes complete sense. I mean, I don't, I think it's sort of like a rubric, right? I mean, so we sort of initially, even for our CBOC, we want to have some sort of decision-making, like, here's how we went about making the decision. So I think, I mean, we would normally want to have some level of criteria by which we're making a decision one way or the other. So I don't think that that's it's not even really an ask, it's kind of an expectation. So we're happy to provide some guidance around that. I think it's great. I think that works for us.
I would just have that, if it's, I don't know if that makes sense, maybe it's because, resolution is public document that we're putting out as a board, if we incorporate some of those in the resolution itself. Just a signal that this, that this is what we would be considering. Otherwise, I too also am agnostic as to having the flexibility. But I think having a sense of what those factors may be, or points, I don't know the right word is here, would be helpful before we bring this to the full board.
Yeah, in fact,
The only thing to consider about adding it to the resolution is that then gives our rubric for everyone. So there's some piece of how we're going to decide what direction we're going to go. We don't necessarily want to signal that to construction people.
Sure.
And, right? So 100%, I think we can come up with a rubric and get that all to us. And then even as we're deciding on one, providing that, hey, here's the rubric that we went through that is pushing us down this direction versus another direction. I would hesitate into writing it because if we change it, we're going to have to come back to you. And so the resolution is intended just to authorize the consideration. And so that if we wanted to go in that direction, yay.
right.
But my recommendation would be we can provide that and provide that to the board.
Right.
Okay,
And
thank you.
the other issue, also in section 3, when you are deciding what delivery methods to use, it would be good if you would bring that to the board so that we know what delivery methods and the factors that you're considering, and then to have the board also to approve it before you go ahead and sign any contracts with people. That we look at the contract, we look at the delivery method, the rubric that you have, and why you believe this is the best method.
Makes complete
Just
sense.
for purposes of transparency to the public as to why this is costing more than another, that there's good reason for it.
Makes complete sense. The only caveat is we don't sign contracts until they come onto the board agenda and you approve them. So our signature of
That's
contracts
right.
are after. So
Yes.
what we would do is as a part of our package to the board would be to include the context in the rubric so that you have
Yes.
that. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
we could do
And
that.
I think the full board would, first of all, I'd like to thank our attorney. It was a really good study session. I think the full board would really appreciate the same presentation with the addition that you add the rubric in the PowerPoint so that it just all makes sense for people. And then we'll listen to their comments for the draft resolution. And then when we come back, we can actually then, make that decision.
So Trustee Kwong, are you suggesting a study session for the March meeting? How would you all, Trustee Oster, how would you all want to
The
move?
March meeting is when you're asking the full board to approve this, correct? So if we would want the study session at that board meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just as awareness, you guys will have 2 study sessions that day, which is totally fine with us. You'll have the bond financing piece, and then you would have this piece, which we can, get into a bites, be cognizant of time for that meeting. But I just wanted to raise some awareness. We're happy to do that.
I'll ask the question, how super critical is it that we do this at the March meeting? If it is, we'll continue to plan for it to be in March, but is this something that we could put off for? That's up to you guys.
Richard, are you comfortable waiting to April or do you really need it for March?
No, I can wait another month.
We'll do it in April then.
We can push it till April.
Okay.
I think April with an additional PowerPoint with, let's say, a 10-point factors or something, or 50-point factors, just kidding, 10.
I'm like, hold on.
And then comments by the Board of Trustees, and then we will know how to revise the resolutions. And then we can do another facilities meeting and we can approve it and bring it back to the full board.
Yeah, I agree with
Can
that.
I make a suggestion? Can we make those adjustments? We'll come back to the facilities committee again in April,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Before the next board meeting.
Right.
And then review the new slides, and then we'll go on our April board meeting. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Just remember that I wanted a revision to section 3, that the board approved the delivery methods before you go out and send out an RFP. That's my point.
I don't, how would we do that?
Well, we would normally go in with we would go in with a CRF saying that we were going down a delivery method. We're asking
Authorization.
for authorization to bid
That's true.
for lease back for the following project.
You would be
Yes,
doing
yeah,
that
so that comes-
anyway.
Anyways.
in the
That's what I
normal
meant.
course. Yeah.
Right, but it doesn't say it that way in the reso, so I would like the resolution to be very clear, because right now it says the superintendent has all discretion to do whatever to carry out the resolution, which means that the board is not approving the delivery method, so I want to make sure that the board approves the delivery method. And then you would just do your presentation with this rubric, and then it's a slam dunk.
Richard, I will tell you, I am old school. I've done hundreds of millions, maybe billions of private contracting, and we always did old fashioned design bid build. And what we would do is we'd really pour over the design. I mean, just scrutinize it for every little detail, because you're right, if you leave out details,
Change
you
orders.
get the change notices, and I've had a few of those too. And then we bid it hard, and then we fight the change notices. That's how we do it. But this is a public sector, and I understand also, I'm convinced that this is a faster method. And I'm certainly willing to try it on these relatively small projects. And like a power distribution project, for example, there's not a lot of finished specifications where things, it's all very technical. Switchgear and power equipment. And then
I'm really sorry.
that's the end of my comments. Go ahead, Alden.
I appreciate this conversation. I do not want to cut it short, but I'm just
Yes.
recognizing that we have 8 minutes until the next committee meeting begins of the budget
Uh-oh.
committee at 5. So we may want,
Right here.
which is here. So we may
Okay.
want to move to CPOC and.
Yes.
Yes, we have.
All right, so we can flesh this out in the
We'll
April
have it, yeah,
facility.
yeah.
I didn't think this would be a hot topic.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
But we don't have much time. This might be a little bit easy. Easier in that, Candace, your, graphics, tell us that in order to check all the boxes for all the groups, and I'm looking at the green on column C and D, those were the sole candidates, so we really somewhat are required to take them. And then we do have a discussion over column B, and we've got the Zoom gallery over column E, so I can't see what we've got there. So this might be quicker than.
Can you move the gallery?
Oh.
Yeah, can you-
It's me, it's me.
can you move the gallery?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah, there we go. And then supporting the college, we have 2. And for business organization, we have 3. So I'm going to suggest to try to be stay on our time budget here. I'm going to suggest that we recommend the 2 greens for C and D, and then try to have as quick of a conversation as we can about B and E.
Perfect.
B and E. B is business organization. E is so active in supporting the college.
Okay.
Okay, and let me start with E because we only have 2 there, and so I think that can be a brief discussion. David Ramirez is a great guy. He's a former student trustee. He did an awesome job. I like him a lot. Having said that, he doesn't live in the district, number one. That's not mandatory, but I think it's a factor. And the other gentleman, Justin, how do you pronounce Justin's name? Is it Swede? I'm not Swede. Justin Swede. I know he's on the foundation board, and I know he's a local business person.
He's from San Marino.
Yeah, and I've met him and talked to him. I think he has a great, business sense, and he's also involved in the Chamber of Commerce. So I really like David, but I think Justin would be a stronger candidate of those two.
I agree.
Okay, so Alton, if you agree,
Sure.
so we'll recommend, now we're, for E, column E, we'll recommend, Justin. Now we're down to column B, where we do have, 3 candidates.
We'll take out Justin.
We'll take out Justin, and now we have Nathaniel and, Cy, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Bye.
Oh, so Nathaniel,
Aye.
yeah, sorry.
And then Sue Kim Choi. I'm unfamiliar with these gentlemen. If either of you have any familiarity type
Nathaniel's
of.
from San Marino. And I think he's a business person. And Sue Kim Choi is from La Cañada. And she is active in a variety of business organizations and profits. And I also think in fundraising too.
Okay, I'm going to defer to either of you if you know either of them.
I don't know either of them. And this is, first of all, I appreciate this is the quickest I think. I think they both have got strong applications and they both, in this case, qualify for this category. To be very conscious of diversity of all forms, I'm leaning towards Sue Kim Choi, because everybody else we have so far that we recommended and are appointing are men.
I think that we should take that into consideration.
I do have to note that I think our committee does not have a lot of women. But that's where the cards have fallen this time.
I'll be candid. I think the prior committee for Measure P was similarly composed.
Yeah.
I think we have better ethnic diversity this time around. So I think we made the decision with row 8, Sue Kim Choi.
Yes.
Okay.
Choi.
I think Michelle has experience with a local bond measure in the Canada. I remember that.
Yes.
Application.
Yes, I remember that from her application.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I just make sure that you guys are aware of one thing? So I'm going to highlight Sue Kim Choi. Going back to 4A, so in terms of racial diversity, you don't have a Hispanic or a Latino representing this committee at all.
Very good point.
No, we're aware of that. We're aware that the committee does not have the diversity that we seek. But it is the applications that came in.
We could go a different direction. Thank you for pointing that out, Candace. We could go with David. I think he's less experienced than Justin. I think Justin brings more to the table, but I also respect the need for diversity. And David is a very conscientious young man, and I think he would take this very seriously, and I think he would go up a learning curve. So I would be open to increasing our diversity. And I think we're going to have lots of strong committee members. You know, he might start out not being very high up a learning curve, and I'll bet he can go up it. Well, Candace, what's David up to right now?
David is at UCLA.
Okay.
He's doing strong advocacy at the state level right now.
Yeah.
In terms of, so he's still very involved in the California community college system, doing some advocacy work on.
I think he's living on campus at UCLA, if I remember from talking to him. So is that going to be a problem for him getting over here?
I would ask that of all of our candidates. So I think,
well, everybody else,
I think he's okay.
Everybody else lives in the district. So,
sure.
Hey.
I could follow up, but I wouldn't anticipate it being a problem.
Well, we should conclude and make a decision. What do you guys want to do?
My leaning is because these are financial issues that we lean more towards an area, a local person with business background.
Okay, that's my leaning too. Okay, but thank you for bringing that point up, Candace.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Do we know, this is a side point, I guess, do we know the leanings of the diversity of the appointments that are being made by each trustee?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't.
I would say largely you have, it's split between our white Caucasian and API. You have one African-American candidate. the reason why I mentioned around just since
Right.
PCC is an HSI, it might be nice to consider that. But if we're gonna go in it this direction,
Well, we do have one black, appointee, right?
yeah, but he wouldn't represent the like, I want to be respectful that he wouldn't represent the Latino community.
Yeah,
Right.
You know, respectfully, I'm a big believer in diversity, but the goal of this committee is to make sure the funds are spent properly. I think we want the strongest group of financial oversight and building experience that we can put on this committee, so the community knows that their money that they're paying for is being
I agree.
spent the way we told them.
And I think the next round, when we recruit for a committee, that we have Alex prepare a list of all the places that we're gonna do outreach, and to make sure that we do outreach into the pockets of community, especially the Black, Hispanic, API, Caucasian, financial demographics, just to make sure that we are going into nooks and crannies of our districts to try to do more outreach to bring them in.
I mean, I don't want to offend. I think the committee has made a decision already, but I do lament the challenge. I think, and this is your point about the exercise.
Alton, the way this works is we make a recommendation, the full board votes, and we'll make the recommendation we just agreed on, but we will make it with that point being noted, and the full board will consider it.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
just really quickly, I can show you kind of what you will get. You'll get a resolution that'll have, background, blah, 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 right? All the members. And then I will enter the names of the representatives here. And then you will get this for the March 15th meeting.
Thank you, Candace.
Thank you,
Okay.
Candace.
Awesome. We
Wherever you are.
are all set, and we have another meeting coming, so I'm going to
Yes.
adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Adjourn.
All right.
Thank you.
You're
You know, Audit and budget.
I move that the facilities committee meeting accept the resolution for the acceptance of the nominees for the CBOC committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Good. Motion carries.